The first budget for Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal government was released just over a week ago. A week ago yesterday, actually, and a lot has happened since then. The opposition parties have been trying to get amendments to the budget, threatening not to support it if they don't see changes. The Conservative Party had one MP cross the floor, another announced he's resigning. So what does it all mean? We've reconvened our federal political panel. We met with them regularly leading up to the federal election. That election was back on April 28th, believe it or not. The people on our panel come from all different political stripes, but they have two things in common. They follow politics closely, and I would bet they are all cheering for the Riders in the Grey Cup this weekend. If you've been following the drama in Ottawa this past week and you want to get in on this conversation, call 1-800-716-2221 or send us an email, bluesky@cbc.ca. So before we get started, as a mention to everybody listening or people that'll be watching this on YouTube later, 1 week from today will be my last show here on Blue Sky and at CBC Saskatchewan. I'm moving on to an opportunity with the city of Regina. So I just wanted people to know in advance of me leaving so that it's not a surprise come next week after we finish celebrating the Riders winning the Grey Cup. See, I'm putting that out into the universe, that I don't just disappear from the airwaves. So that is an update from me and the team here at Blue Sky. So our partisan panel is heavy with Saskatoon representation today. In our Saskatoon studio is Doug Richardson. He's a Saskatoon lawyer who spent 5 years in Ottawa and was the former chief of staff for Liberal Prime Minister John Turner. Welcome back.
Thank you, Sam, and congrats on your new job. All the best.
Thank you so much. And beside him in the studio is Paul Merriman. You'll know Paul as a former Sask Party MLA, spent 13 years as an elected member of the legislature, serving in cabinet as Minister of Health, Social Services, Corrections, Policing, and Public Safety. And before politics, he was the CEO of the Saskatoon Food Bank. He now works as senior counsel with Prairie Sky Strategy, a consulting firm based out of Calgary. Welcome back.
Thanks very much, and congratulations on your new opportunity. We're going to miss you.
Oh, thank you. This is not about me, though, but I appreciate all of the, the loveliness. And joining us virtually, but also in Saskatoon, is Claire Card. She's a professor in the College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan, and she did run for the federal NDP in Saskatoon in 2021. Welcome back.
Hi, thanks, Sam. And yes, I'm a huge Rider fan, so we're simpatico.
Okay, so can we agree we're all cheering for the same team and that this time next week we'll be celebrating a Rider win? Is that what we're putting in the universe?
I hope so, yes.
The one thing that unites us all.
The one thing, the green blood in all of us.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to start with the tea, the drama, the juicy stuff. The floor crossing, because this was big news in the last week. Nova Scotia MP Chris D'Entremont left the Conservatives, joined the Liberals. Here's an excerpt from The National.
What sealed the deal is when I got yelled at.
In his first broadcast interview since crossing the floor to the Liberals, D'Entremont says Conservative MPs Chris Warkentin and Andrew Scheer barged into his office. His assistant almost knocked over. When they heard he was considering joining Mark Carney's government, he says they proceeded to yell at him.
And, tell me how much of a snake I really was and turning my back on my constituents and the people that voted for me.
D'Entremont says his discontent had been brewing for some time over Pierre Poilievre's leadership style, which he describes as very negative.
Quite honestly, a lot of times I felt it was a part of a frat house rather than a serious political party. It wasn't about keeping government to account. It wasn't about trying to do the best for your constituents. It was about tearing down.
So in a statement to CBC News, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre called D'Entremont a liar. He says D'Entremont is now spinning more lies to, quote, fit perfectly with the Liberal caucus. A Conservative spokesperson says D'Entremont left the party because he was passed over for the deputy speakership position. We did put in a request to speak with Regina MP, Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer. We did not hear back, but Andrew Scheer did speak to reporters about the allegation. Have a listen.
In the last election, Canadians elected a minority government. They wanted a strong opposition to hold Mark Carney to account. Mark Carney did not receive a majority mandate from Canadian voters, yet he's trying to cobble together a majority through undemocratic means with backroom deals and pressure tactics. The only rumors I've heard of intimidation and harassment are from Liberals badgering Conservatives in elevators and calling them at home. All of this is an attempt to distract from Mark Carney's first budget.
Oh, the drama. Now, Conservative Alberta MP Matt Genereux announced last Thursday he is resigning from the House of Commons. Now, that's contrary to speculation that he was also going to join the Liberal Party. We don't know his exact departure date, but he suggested it would be in the spring, and that would prompt a by-election for his Edmonton seat, and he won that by a relatively narrow margin, 5 percentage points over his Liberal opponent back in April. So now that we have what happened, who wants to take this first? Who has the deepest thoughts on this one? Doug, I feel like it's going to be you.
Well, I wasn't keen to go there because I think it is, but thanks for asking, Sam. I think it's a major distraction because I think there's a lot of positive in this budget for Saskatchewan. And I think your listeners would maybe not have had time to look down at the fine print because of this distraction. Obviously, I'm thrilled that we're closer to the Liberal government. Mr. Carney's government is closer to a majority. But I think it is a disappointing distraction from what is a very good budget.
Paul, you are the one on the panel who has been a politician. I know it's not a federal politician, but a politician nonetheless. Yeah. Are there conversations, backroom dealings about who's going to join other parties? And are there rumors about, are those things that happen in your experience over 13 years in the legislature in Saskatchewan?
I think there's always that opportunity of trying to see if there's somebody on the opposition side or on the government side that is more aligned with you. It does happen, but it doesn't happen very often. And it really gets highlighted when it's a tight minority government. That's when it really gets the news, somebody crossing the floor. Because the numbers are so tight in Prime Minister Carney's minority government, it gets a lot of attention. But I did, yeah, absolutely. I was elected in Regina, and I had an opposition member come up and say, hey, you're a little more centrist. You ran the food bank. What do you think about sitting down and having a coffee? And I said, no, absolutely not. I appreciate your willingness to ask, but the voters elected me as a SAS party, and that's where my loyalties are, and that's where I line up. It does happen, but it doesn't happen very often, and it's only in specific situations that it gets highlighted. But we used to banter across the floor back and forth to certain MLAs, and they would do that. Oh, come on over to our side. We'll take you on our side. We'll help. We'll help you out with that. And then it goes back and forth, but it's not taken very serious. But when somebody does cross the floor in a minority government, it is a big issue, and it certainly, as Doug said, it distracted from the budget that did have some certain benefits for Saskatchewan and for Western Canada.
When I'm actually really I love your honesty here. I did not know that story. It actually had a don't drop your jaw moment, but I'm surprised to hear that. We've heard that he talked to his constituents and that he felt that this was the best move for him. Is that even possible I don't know that that's possible in a provincial riding, let alone a federal one.
I would say, getting back to your constituents, if he was going and talking to his constituents about this, it would have been leaked. Somebody would have called out and said, yeah, this person's going to cross the floor. I'm of the opinion that if you're very strongly motivated to move from one party to another, that you should look at going into a by-election. And I know Mr. Belanger did that in northern Saskatchewan years ago, where he was elected as a Liberal, decided to step down and went in as a New Democrat, which was fine, and he put it to the people. Now, I don't think that's going to happen in this scenario just because the numbers are so tight, but it is a bit of a challenge for the party that is losing a member, and I think the Conservatives are reeling right now because this should have been their moment to go on offense on the budget, and they've been playing defense ever since the budget has been dropped, and that's not a good spot for any opposition, is to be playing defense and being distracted by something that is not within your mandate to hold the government accountable. It's internal.
Claire, the convention for the Conservatives is in Calgary in late January, and Poilievre will face a leadership review at that time. I'm wondering, what do you make of d'Entremont's critiques of his leadership style?
I think there's something there. I would say that probably the members that are red Tories are probably not happy with the party moving maybe a little too far to the right for their taste in some of their rhetoric. It seems a little bit corrosive, the way we see a leader blaming specific groups of people for problems rather than looking at underlying policy gaps. And I think the leadership style still comes across like, again, an angry frat boy sometimes. So that's something that's not very popular with Canadians right now. I think we're looking for a different kind of future.
What do you make of what's happened as an NDP member?
Well, of course, the NDP is reeling from their election losses, but we see public opinion coming back in our direction. And particularly when times are tough, we understand that people really are looking for the basic services that help them. And I'm not sure that the Liberals are prepared to go farther than what they already have.
Paul, one of the things that Claire said was red Tories maybe not being happy about the direction a party is taking. In your experience, the Sask party started off more center than they've moved over the years. And they've still managed to be in power through all of this with the government. But I'm wondering about the conversations you have inside of caucus and inside with your colleagues about if you see yourself represented by the party anymore, specifically if you've been in a party for a long time when it started to where it's gone now, who the leader is versus who the leader is now in those styles. How do you reconcile that as a politician?
Well, there's a few things. One is parties always have an evolution. They always start to move kind of where they think the majority of the votes are. And we saw the federal Liberals that they started moving a little bit more left in Prime Minister Trudeau's era, that they started moving that. So that's where they thought that they're more aligned. With the provincial politics, I used to have a thing in caucus where we would look at, when we were bringing up a policy, I would look to the most right-wing person that was in the caucus and see their reaction. And then I would look at the most left-wing person in the caucus to see if their reaction. Okay, if we're between those two individuals, we seem to be okay. Has a lot of those middle votes not represented in the caucuses more? I would say to a certain extent, yes, and that has to do with the cities that the Sask party, other than one seat, don't hold the cities, is where the majority of those centrist votes are, and we saw the New Democrats move into that for various reasons. But you see a little bit more in rural Saskatchewan on the right of center, where you would see the cities as a red Tory. And I just read an interesting article about that federally that the red Tories feel like they're homeless right now. They don't have a place to park their vote because the federal Conservatives are moving right and the Liberals are moving left. So there's that vacant area where they might vote one way or the other, but it's not really in their comfort zone and they might not feel that they're represented. Now, I know Mr. Richardson would probably say different on that, but I thought it was an interesting concept that red Tories, I think not just in provincial or federal politics, but you also see it in the American politics. That center is very
wide open,
underrepresented because you have the polarizing of politics right now, and it's not good for overall for Canadians, I don't feel.
Is it scary to step into the middle, though? Because it feels like we live in a world right now. And that's why I love having these conversations where people do openly disagree with each other, but can still, smile and shake hands at the end of the conversation. And you're not blocking each other and, all the things that come with that. But is it a dangerous thing to step into the middle right now? Because everyone expects you to take a hard stance one way or the other.
I would say yes. It is. It's not dangerous. It's just against the grain a little bit. Of people are very polarized on issues. But I think if you look at Canada in general, we are a centrist country. We do have that feel about us that we are empathetic, but we understand the tax issues. That the tax and spend sometimes works. The economy needs to be opened up, but we have to do that in a responsible way. So I always feel like Canadians have that balance I think that balance tipped a little bit much too far one way in the previous 8 years, and I think Mr. Carney or Prime Minister Carney's bringing that back to the center because he understands that's where the votes are, and that's also where Canadians feel the most comfortable.
Doug, what would you say about the evolution of the Liberal Party? Because it has ebbed and flowed over the years.
For sure, and I would say that we're evidencing the return of what would be described as the Chrétien-Martin era, as opposed to the Pierre Trudeau era, which was overly progressive, considered overly progressive. The strength of the Carney government, I think, is he's been able to balance center-left support, and the worst claim that's heaped on him is he keeps stealing policies from the Conservatives. And I don't necessarily buy that, but this is a centrist government along the Paul Martin approach to governing, which maybe wasn't a long term, but was a successful term in terms of striking a balance and going through. You recall Prime Minister Martin was in a minority situation. I think it is to endorse part of what Paul said, Sam. I think Claire might agree, is this is basically a centrist country, different than the United States, different than many European countries. And part of the success so far in Canada is our ability to deal with social media in a more balanced fashion.
Claire, the NDP kind of holds the power here. But
That's true.
But we don't see them waving it around because the Conservatives have taken the spotlight with, losing MPs. Why do you think we haven't seen them? Is it because they don't have a leader? Why do you think we haven't seen more from the NDP, even though, maybe small but mighty in this case?
I think it does get back to the fact that Don Davies, as the interim leader, has been speaking out, but people aren't considering him the final leader, right? So there will be a leadership contest, and the leader will be selected in March of 2026. We often see the Liberals as being very red Tory-ish right now. I mean, the policy direction in terms of cutting, people in the public service, the consideration for, the way they're handling climate, for example, it feels very, red Tory-ish to us, I think, as the New Democrats. So you're going to find that we agree with some of the things in the budget and many things we don't. So it's under consideration, and frankly, I think many people still feel that Carney has, in a difficult situation, handled Trump as best maybe most people could. So
were you going to say something?
Well, I'm agreeing with I think everybody on your listening audience would agree with what Claire's just said. Managing the President of the United States is, I'm sure, taking up a third of the day for this Prime Minister and his staff and their ministers.
I'm Sam McKeag. Today we are talking about the drama in Ottawa, the federal budget, and everything that impacts us as voters. My guests today are Paul Merriman, Doug Richardson, and Claire Card. They are our federal political panel. And I want to get into the federal budget. So in terms of numbers, it shows a deficit of roughly $78 billion for 2025-26 fiscal year, a figure lower than some economists had expected, but still higher than what the last Liberal government had promised before U.S. President Donald Trump launched this whole trade war situation. All told, about $141 billion in new spending over the next 5 years, partially offset by some $51.2 billion in cuts, or a total of $60 billion in cuts in, quote, savings. I'm curious from each of your perspectives what your takeaways were. Claire, I'll start with you.
I think for us as New Democrats, one of the things we're very concerned about is what's happened with climate. I mean, Saskatchewan's gone through this, again, horrific summer, just like in 2023, where fires burned everywhere. The Liberals decided to cut the tree planting program. That is the carbon capture program that we know actually works, planting trees. It's been effective in Canada for a very long time. And cutting a program that it was relatively low cost just seemed irresponsible. And then coupled with that, I mean, now trying to discuss removing the caps from the oil and gas sector, relying again on carbon capture, which has not been very successful here in Saskatchewan, cost us a fair amount of money and is a long way technologically from where we need to be. So I think, when we look at our contribution to the COP30. What we're trying to achieve is actually governments being held to account on climate, and I see us moving in the opposite direction. There's a lot of opportunity for good jobs in that sector, and we're just not capitalizing in it.
Paul, I'll go to you for a response on that because you were a politician during the time that all of that was enacted, the carbon capture facility. What did you take away, and do you have thoughts on the environment and their plan there as well? I noticed that they're still trying to hit their emissions target.
Yeah, I think they've set out very aggressive targets. We have to balance all of that, the environmental side, with growing our economy to pay for that. As Claire just said, the carbon capture isn't cheap, but it's doing the right thing. So there's investments that we can make on green technology and making sure that our things are done responsibly and sustainably, but it does cost money. And when it costs money, that money has to come from somewhere. So we have to have that growth of our economy to be able to pay for that, not just for the human services, the schools, education, social services, hospital, but we have to pay for green technology. It's not cheap. We want to be able to do our part, but we also want to be able to grow our economy in a sustainable manner. We have, the most economic and environmental products out there in Saskatchewan, but we can't get them to market for various reasons. So we do responsible environmental assessments, but that has to be balanced with the economy. It can't go just one way or the other.
What did you take away from the budget? Oh, Claire, I'll let you respond, and then Paul, I'll get you to tell me what you took away.
Sure.
I just want to go a little farther on the forest fire. So people do not realize that the forest fires that happened in 2023 and this year created more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire country did in the whole year. Mm-hmm. So when we lighten the reins on moving forward on the environment, where we know there's lots of good sustainable jobs, and we contribute to more burning of our forests, it doesn't make any sense. It's just, we're not meeting any of our requirements. We actually put in law that we would work on emissions and be net zero by 2050. And we see this rolling back and back and back. We're paying for it with insurance. We're paying for it with lung disease. We're paying for it in many painful ways. And this is a portfolio that the entire world should be taking seriously. And we're just not feeling it here. You can use the excuse of the economy, but doesn't ring true to me.
Okay, Doug.
Can I respond to Claire?
Yes, you're chomping at the bit here. Go ahead.
Well, no. Claire makes a very good point. And one of the reasons I think Liberal support rose in the last election is because of the perception that the Prime Minister-elect is pro-climate change issues. And it's a fact. He's written a book, for heaven's sakes, and you may be dissatisfied with growth. Just hear me out for a second, Claire. But the fact is the budget has allocated $246 million just simply allocated for fighting forest fires. We still have maintained the industrial carbon tax. Probably Paul and some conservatives, maybe don't put it on Paul, but object to that. And the fact is that on the agriculture side, we've announced some major biofuel production incentives that I think are positive both on the green side and on the industrial side. Mm-hmm. And what the NDP, with all due respect, Claire, have overlooked is the focus of this budget. The focus of this budget is investment-driven, is growth-driven, and the Prime Minister is trying to be bold in the face of your very adroit comment a moment ago, that is that we have to manage our response with an erratic President of the United States because our times have changed. We can't be as green as we'd like to be. We need to be green, but we can't be as green as we might like to be. And just let's be honest about where we are on the canola and the EV issue. We're there because the President of the United States wants to attack the Chinese. That impacts us going down the line on how green we take the EV issue. So I think you have to be fair about this issue. I don't think you should stop pushing the issue. You're right to do it, but I think the budget has touched on a whole bunch of things, and I haven't even begun to talk about critical minerals or some of the other things that were done on the Indigenous side that impact the North that deal with the fires that you talked about.
Do you want to respond, Claire? shortly?
I mean, there's lots of ways to grow the economy, and we've seen the numbers crunched in many different directions. I think that we're being foolish, again, to put ourselves in a place where we're looking for technology that isn't really working very well. This could be carbon capture as one example. It could also be small modular nuclear reactors. No proven design for small modular nuclear reactors. People do not want them in their backyard. We're not taking account for 100,000 years. We have to look after the waste. Not on a dry land, maybe in a nuclear submarine. There's a proven design for that.
Ontario and New Brunswick both have proven technology.
Yeah. And in today's, one more thing, today's warfare has changed. So today's warfare with drone technology can now take a small modular nuclear reactor with no secondary containment, blow it up, and destroy entire communities. Those are big risks for Canadians, and I don't think we're prepared to do that. Not, you build a different grid for renewables versus nuclear. We should be supporting the current nuclear we have, but should we go deep into small modular nuclear reactors? No, I don't think so. I think we're heading in the wrong direction there.
Okay, we could totally go in this direction, but I want to get to a lot of things, and I feel like we're going to argue in a circle about this one, perhaps. So first, I want to go to Don in Regina. He's on the line. If you have thoughts today, you want to weigh in, you want to get in on the conversation, you can call us 1-800-716-2221 or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. I'll go to Don in a second. First, I want to read an email from Gerald. He says, John Diefenbaker, Robert Stanfield, Joe Clark, even Brian Mulroney would not recognize the Conservative Party of today. True red Tories have no place in today's Conservatives. The present Liberal government is as close as we will get. And that is from Gerald in Chaplin. Don in Regina's on the line. You've been patiently waiting. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm just trying to get out of the wind here. I'm sitting outside in the sun. Yes, to me it's about integrity, and I don't see much of it coming out of the Conservatives these days, especially with what happened to the person who D'Entremont, I believe it was, who crossed the floor. I mean, Mr. Scheer, and he looks pretty bad in this. And when I hear him talk about integrity, it bothers me a bit. Here's a guy who falsified his background. He claimed he was an insurance broker. He was an insurance clerk. Nothing wrong with being an insurance clerk, but he did that. He lied to his constituents. I mean, if you faked your resume on a job application, you can be fired for that. And yet he continues. And yet the other thing is that the same man, when he ran for leader of the Conservative Party and won, during that campaign, you will recall that he was brought forward by the Globe and Mail that he was actually a dual citizen, both Canadian and American. His father happened to be American. Nothing wrong with being an American. Nonetheless, he didn't tell anybody. When asked why he didn't tell anybody, he said, well, nobody asked. Well, nobody asked lots of questions. I mean, where's the integrity in not being upfront to your own party? We had a person, the leader of the Conservative Party, who just about got elected Prime Minister. He had dual citizenship and didn't tell anybody. That seems to be wrong. I mean, there's no integrity, and it bothers me a whole bunch. So that's what I have to say.
Don, thanks for your call. Doug, you had a physical reaction to that, so I'll let you respond.
No, I actually, if you don't mind, it's your show. That caller's entitled to his views.
Yeah, of course.
I would like us to circle back. It's your show, sorry, Sam. But I'd like to circle back because I'm a little concerned we won't get a chance to tell your listening audience some of the strengths of this budget.
Oh, we'll get there. I promise we'll get there. I promise we'll get there. But I do want you to be able to respond to what Don in Regina had to say. Paul, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, my thought is you got to be careful about those things. You really got to be careful about attacking people, what was said in a moment in time, and you also got to be very careful of grouping all politicians into this. That they're deceitful, that they're not doing something, they're dishonest, and they're in it for themselves. I can tell you myself, I didn't get into that for the money. I didn't get into it for the fame. I got in to make sure that my son and his kids after that had every opportunity to live in Saskatchewan. So I would just be cautious in going out and attacking people's character. You can attack their policies. If you disagree with that respectfully, I'm all up for that, as we have different opinions here, but we do respect each other's opinions. Attacking somebody because they might have a dual citizenship or they said something here or there, I think it's just a distraction. Let's talk about what's obviously what Doug wants to talk about, the budget, and about what is going to happen for Saskatchewan in Prime Minister Carney's turn. And if there is another election coming up, which there usually is in a minority government, what do the people of Saskatchewan think about the federal government?
Okay, so let's get into that. Claire, what did you like in the budget?
I like some of the things they didn't cut. For example, I like the fact they maintained a dental program, that they kept pharmacare at least as it is. I'd like to see that expanded, but the dental care program's been very popular, brought a lot of people a lot of great relief and removed a lot of budgetary stress for them from that. I was happy to see that they were considering again the Canada Builds program, doing more with co-op housing. I thought that was positive. I like the idea of doing the modular homes as other countries have done. Unemployment insurance has been broadened. Most people never collect their unemployment insurance, and now making those benefits a little bit better to suit the current needs of the public, I think is super important. Those would be the main things that I was pleased with. I have a lot of the things on immigration. I'd give them an F. So
okay, we will get to immigration in a bit. But Paul, what did you like in the budget?
I thought it was a good budget in the way that infrastructure is being brought forward. This is something that Saskatchewan and all provinces are looking for, is what's the infrastructure dollars to be able to grow our country and grow our province and get our, not just necessarily our product to the markets, but also make it accessible and a priority for businesses that are out there in other countries to look at Canada and Saskatchewan as a place to park their dollars. And if they can't, they see the opportunities here, but if they can't get their product or whatever to market, they're not going to invest. And we've seen billions of dollars leave the country for various reasons over multiple governments over the past 25 years. We need to get that back. We need to be able to protect ourselves. I like that Prime Minister Carney is talking about a 5-year plan to strengthen our country and be less reliant on the United States, diversify our markets. I think that's exactly what should be done. Saskatchewan started this years ago with our trade offices in the Pacific Rim area to be able to expand our markets to not get so highly reliant on the United States. And I see that Prime Minister Carney's working on that. That is great for Saskatchewan. I think that there's some opportunities in there to be able to pull back on some of the spending, but understand that, again, you have to spend money to be able to make money. I just want to make sure those dollars are going into the right places.
Okay. And Doug, what did you like in the budget?
I just think these two did an outstanding job explaining the strengths of that budget, Sam. So what caught my attention is the difficult balance that the Prime Minister tried to strike, and I believe has struck. You'd expect me to say this. You kindly alluded at the start to some of my background, but another job that I had previous to working for a Liberal Prime Minister was as a Chief of Staff to a Finance Minister, and Paul would have lived this. Claire, you're familiar with this, is you're getting pushed from all sides, and you're trying to balance a myriad of interests, and the power of the lobby forces in this country are significant. The business interest on one side, the progressive interests on the other side, so trying to strike them. But I'll tell you what I'd like to talk for just a second, if you permit me, because it impacts on the North, and Claire raised that, and that's housing. The federal government has allocated $2.8 billion for rural and northern Indigenous housing. I think that's very significant. If you start to do the math, probably as significant for our province as it is for any in Canada. They've also allocated $1.5 billion to support rental protection. What does that mean? I'm not sure exactly. I'll do my best to explain it. What they're wanting to make sure is that adequate housing that exists isn't being leveled so that wealthy home developers can build a brand new condo in the price of what was adequate housing, $1.5 billion. The other big plus, and I've been tangentially involved, and Paul knows this I'm sorry, to be fair, Claire probably does even better, but I've been involved with Sask Native Rentals and Sask Native Housing, and it's a volunteer thing, but we are trying to build more housing in our community. The fact of the matter is, without CMHC, we could not build the housing we're building.
Absolutely.
There's some beautiful housing being built up on Hart Road. But the government has increased the bond level of CMHC, and most of your people are saying, what a bunch of esoteric nonsense, Richardson. But it is important. They've gone to $80 billion of lending capacity. So that means that programs that might not go ahead or might have not had the as much money to put up front can now go forward. I could prattle on, just to be fair to my colleagues. If I could just go back to one other thing that I touched on in trying to meet the challenging points Claire was making on housing. Just to reiterate, $357 million to augment fleets across Canada, but it will really be important for Saskatchewan. That's sort of, Claire is going to argue, well, the horse is out of the barn by then. But to make sure we've got adequate firefighting capacity, because it was a terrible 2-3 years that we've had, particularly if you live in northern Saskatchewan. I can come back to agriculture later, but to be fair to my colleagues, I think I tried to balance, and I thought they did a fair job mentioning the strengths of the budget.
I do wonder why they haven't created a federal task force to figure out how to attack wildfires at this point, because this isn't just a prairie issue or a BC issue anymore. As we saw, it was an issue right across the country. And I know every time the provincial budget comes up, one of us as a journalist will stand up and say, why is there not more money for firefighting? And they will say, because we don't know how much it's going to be. In some cases,
I've answered that question.
Yes, you have. I've asked you that. I've asked you that before. And I think we can talk about fires. That we could do a whole show still on the situation around fires and the environment. But I want to talk about infrastructure, because tomorrow they are supposed to announce more of the Make Canada Strong projects, supposed to stimulate economic activity and generational investment. Do you see that, Doug, in the budget, generational investment?
100%. I'm glad you raised it, and you must have thought I was glossing over and not coming. So the allocation is $51 billion over 10 years. So suppose you divide that's $5 billion a year. But more importantly, they've set aside $27.8 billion to support community, municipal, local infrastructure needs. So that's going to mean small communities, if I can name Yorkton, Swift Current, Meadow Lake. This isn't, I think, focused on a Saskatoon and Regina big project. I think this is designed to help smaller communities that badly need to match up. Paul and I were discussing this beforehand, his experience as a minister. Getting the one-third that we had under a very successful program that just got finished 3 years or 4 years ago, $900 million of federal money at the time. But this program, I think, will be very important to smaller communities. And there's a second aspect to this. The federal government has allocated $5 billion to support healthcare infrastructure. Once again, if I was being intellectually honest with your audience, you divide that by 10, and then you apply our percentage share. It's not as huge a number as you would like, but it's not insignificant, and it will help in different projects across the province. I think are two very important things given what our hospital rooms are facing. I hope nobody on this call has recently had to line up at an emergency ward. And I'm not throwing this out to blame the provincial government. I know the pressure they're under. But there is going to be some additional funding in this budget for that.
We talked last week, we had a number of different communities on the show talking about how they're basically robbing Peter to pay Paul to try and get, they have these big infrastructure
100%.
projects. You've heard about what's going on in Duck Lake. He's gotten to the point where he's like, do we sell the naming rights of the town? Like, desperate times in some cases call for desperate measures. I know a number of small communities had an opportunity to take part in a grant. And so wastewater treatment plants and water treatment plants were like a hot commodity over the last couple of years. But there's so many other infrastructure needs that it's nice to hear you explain it that way for the smaller communities, because I think people in those areas will be happy to hear that. Claire, I want to ask you about the Buy Canadian policy that was released on Monday in New Brunswick. It's supposed to be no longer a best effort, but an obligation in terms of all federal agencies and crown corporations, federal procurement and infrastructure and defense funding, et cetera. We don't know if it will apply to private companies building infrastructure, if they want money from the feds, if they have to buy Canadian. But do you see some pros and cons here in this trying to force us to think more inside our country?
Well, I mean, along with interprovincial trade barriers, yes. What has happened sometimes is the projects are made so large that a small company that maybe has excellent electricians or excellent plumbers or people cannot simply compete with a former SNC type Lavalin type contractor. Many times those are international contractors who come in and take the work of Canadians. So yeah, we are very much, I would say, as a party, supportive of this type of policy approach where we put Canadians first, that we put employment first, and we try to make sure that the money is spent here domestically. We got caught out in COVID-19 where we didn't have enough gloves and safety glasses and everything else because we didn't manufacture that sort of thing. So we need to make sure that we employ Canadians with good paying jobs. Certainly the cost of living and affordability is front and center. The cons could be that sometimes that is more expensive, I think people would rather have the money stay in the local economy, would rather have local Canadian products used, and probably are more confident in the quality of those products as well, rather than always the least cost, which hasn't always worked out for many people in many projects.
I want to go back to the phones. We have another caller. Rhonda's on the line in Regina. Rhonda, go ahead.
Thanks, Sam. So I want to say I've appreciated a number of Claire's comments on different topics. I'm going to focus on our climate crisis. I can't remember if I learned or I was reminded the other day when I was listening to a program that good old China is aiming to be the world leader in renewable energy. They're putting a lot into that. And also what I learned some time ago is, the aspect of China seeking to become, the world leader above and beyond the United States. So I have a lot of issues with China, but that they are leading the way in renewable energy. And I agree with Claire. I think we need to focus on that more. Also, I've heard comments, again, on different programs about how Saskatchewan in particular could be such a leader in solar and wind to the extent that that could be exported. Mm-hmm. And, of course, then, transition workers from oil and gas into renewable energy. Time is ticking, and we keep playing around with the climate crisis. So that's the comments I want to pass on today.
Thanks for your call, Rhonda. I appreciate it. I am not going to give you an opportunity to respond to those because I want to talk about immigration before we go, and we only have a few minutes left. Tomorrow, we're dedicating an hour to discuss the changes to Canada's immigration system that were outlined in the budget and the impact that'll have on the economy and the people who've moved to Canada from around the world who are hoping to build a life here. I'm curious on your thoughts, Paul. I'll start with you on the thoughts on reducing immigration numbers.
Yeah, I think the immigration needs to be more focused. I had the opportunity to be immigration ledge secretary early on in my political career and saw the opportunities of going to citizenship ceremonies and being able to see how this is life-changing for individuals, and the stories that they've endured to become a Canadian citizen is a very valued part of their life, and they're changing their children's lives like we can't imagine. And the only way I could equate it was it'd be the equivalent to us winning the lottery. They've won their lottery. Mm-hmm. Now, in saying that, immigration, we have to take our piece of refugees. We have to take our piece of, to do our part in the international world. But I think the immigration needs to be more focused on around economic immigration and make sure that if we are investing as Canadians to people that are coming to this country, either they're coming for schooling or they're coming for economic prosperity or social prosperity, we need to make sure that we're focusing those dollars that they are bringing and adding great value into Canada, and making sure that those individuals that are out there are going to have a long life in Canada and be able to enjoy all the benefits that Canada has, because we are such a great country. I think we forget about that once in a while. And if you have forgotten that, go to a citizenship ceremony, sit down and listen to what the people are saying on how great of a country that we do have here. So I would say the immigration is important, but it needs to be focused in and around economic immigration to make sure that we're adding value into our country.
Okay, I only have 30 seconds each for both of you to respond, because otherwise we will get cut off. Claire, you can go first.
Okay, so my big gripes would be very much around what's happened to the international student portfolio. The University of Saskatchewan's down 1,000 international students. It's a massive financial cut. None of the large universities in Canada were abusers of the student visa program. It was the strip mall colleges in places like Ontario that abused it. We haven't actually been very surgical in our correction of these problems, and it's hurting Canada's innovation agenda. It goes on and on. So forcing the large institutions to take these massive cuts is just really a non-starter for all of us here. And the government's been tone deaf about dealing with that. I would also say the temporary foreign worker program needs a lot more tune-up too. So
okay, Doug, 30 seconds or less. Your thoughts on immigration and the budget?
I'm sorry, with respect, I greatly disagree with what Clara said.
You have to do it in 30 seconds.
The universities had an opportunity. Universities bring students in, they get extra fees, and they did not spend a moment dealing with the housing issue, and they knew it was a real issue, and they should have dealt with it.
Okay, that was shorter than 30 seconds. Props to you. I have so enjoyed having these conversations with the three of you. This really is always the highlight for me whenever we're doing these panels. I love that you agree to disagree. You're always so polite to each other, but bring such strong perspectives in who you are and what you represent. And I'm just so grateful for your time today. I hope that you will cheer hard on Sunday, and that next week we will be celebrating a Rough Rider Grey Cup. And I wish you all the best of the rest of this week. Thanks so much for being here, you three.
Right back
you too,
to
Sam.
you.
Thanks, Sam. And just a quick thank you to all our veterans out there and those people that continue to serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. That is our federal political panel: Paul Merriman, Doug Richardson, and Claire Card.